Good morning and welcome to my YouTube channel. This morning I got up at 4 this morning. This is the first day as we're easing out of lockdown that we're allowed to travel anywhere within our local authority area. So I've travelled to Glen, which is within my local authority area, and I'm trying to find what they call Fion's Rock. So I've walked about half an hour up the mountain. I think I've got another hour to go. What I'll do is I'll turn the camera on when I reach the top, because it's just, as you can see, it's pretty barren at the moment. The sun's rising behind me. I got here at 6:15. My first stop, I stopped for 20 minutes and realised I was in the wrong place. So then had to walk back along to the car, drove along the road, managed to find this place and realised I'm now in the right place. So let's see where this journey takes us this morning. I'm really excited to try and find these rocks. They're pretty special. I'll explain more about them when we reach the top. So I've now reached Fion's stone. We're high up in the mountains in Glen. I've given myself 5 minutes just to get a wee rest. So I'm showing you behind it, because if I turn the camera around, you're going to get blinded by the sun, as you can see. But what I've done already is I've taken some shots of the rock, but with the sun in the background. I've put on a polarizer and an ND grad, and hopefully that turns out. It's just really difficult to shoot into the sun. I also shot at f/16 so I could get starbursts to the sun. But what we'll do is I'll go through how we take these shots, and what I'll do is I'll start at the front of the rock where it's being lit by the sun, and I'll walk you through how I'm taking the compositions. So we've got the sun behind us and I want to get a shot. I've got my polarizer on. I've actually set my shutter speed to a 25th of a second. I've got ISO 50. I'll just increase that to a 15th of a second. I've focused on the rock. And I'll take my shot. So I've got the ND grad filter over the polarizer to give me more blue in the sky, because the sun's up, it's really bright. So it's probably about 7:30 in the morning and the sun's not fully up above the mountains yet. But what I'm looking for now is different compositions, and I'm placing the rock on the left hand side of my shot, and now I'm placing the rock on the right hand side of my shot. Now the only challenge we have here is the mountains in the background. So what I'd like to do is get some form of separation of the rock away from the mountain, which means we either have to walk far right or we'll have to walk far left. So what we'll do is, we've got plenty of time, so why don't we try both compositions and then see how it works. And then what I'll do is, as usual, I'll just share the images as I go along, and then you get to see what I see through the camera. It's just too difficult so far because of the glare for the sun. So I've come to the far left of the rock, where I've got complete separation. There's no mountain behind the rock. I've got the rock plus these other rock formations on the right hand side. I've set it to a 15th of a second f11 and ISO 100. I might just increase the shutter speed a bit to 25th of a second and just darken it down a bit. Now I've also noticed this rock. So the other danger that you've got to be aware of when you're taking photos and the sun's directly behind you is you casting your own shadow. So you'll see my tripod shadow and my shadow. What I'm going to try and do is use that rock as foreground interest and then take an exposure around that composition between that foreground rock and Fion's rock. Well, in true good form, I forgot how cold it was this morning. It was -4 when I left the car, and there's a lot of frost, and I've just slipped down that hill right at my backside, so in true form I'm soaking again. So what I've now got is this rock on the right hand side of where we were standing. I moved to there earlier, but I actually didn't like the composition because it wasn't there was no separation for the rock because the mountain was still in the background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus in on this rock just now. What I might do, I'm going to take a shot of the Fion's rock as it is at the moment. But I might, actually what I'm going to do is reduce my f-stop to 2.8 because I want to blur out the rocks in the foreground, and that actually might make quite a nice shot. And I'm just looking behind the little camera and there's some sun rays coming down the valley. I think I'm going to take shots that direction even although the sun's potentially in our face. We'll give it a shot and see how that looks. Okay, so while I was taking a shot of Fion's rock, when I was walking back to the little camera, the scenery down the glen is absolutely beautiful. There's a small puffy cloud right down the bottom of the glen. There's some sun rays coming down on the left hand side through the mountains, and in the middle of the composition all the fields are white with frost, but there's a road or a fence that's taking me down, so I've got a leading line of a fence taking me right down to the frosty fields, right towards that small puff of cloud, and then I've got the sun rays coming in the right hand side. I'm starting to get clouds as well up on the top of the mountain, so what I'll do is I'm going to do a bracket shot just so that I get all exposures. I'm still conscious that the sun's blaring away here. Not that I'm complaining about the sun blaring away because it's rare that we get the sun. And that cloud formation starting to break up. So what I'm going to do is going to nip up and get my long lens, and then I'll see how that shot looks with the long lens. Alright, I've put my long lens on. I haven't put any filters on the lens because I'm using the lens hood. So hopefully that'll protect the lens from any lens glare from the sun. So I'm just going to zoom in down the glen. I've got a 50th of a second f11. It's really nice. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to zoom further in because I like, there's just a group of trees on the peak of that hill, and I'll take the shot because the mountain in the foreground's been silhouetted. I wonder if I come further back, so if I zoom out and zoom back in, the problem I've got is the sun's going in my eye, so it's difficult for me to see what's in focus. So we're shading and a shading and a shading. What I'm going to do is I might move over to the right because I want a shot of those. There's a whole bunch of trees sticking out for the bottom of the rock. And I'd like to get that there, it's there. So I want to get that shot. Okay, so I can see those trees. I heard noises earlier and there's a couple of hill walkers. So what I might do, there's a couple of nice image opportunities here. So if I focus in on those trees, and again the sun's in my eyes, so I've got my focus right. And then if I just change my composition a bit. So I'm swinging for the right to the left, and then I've got a photograph in the centre. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to zoom in on that cluster of trees. And I'm going to have a bit at the top of the mountain in the scene, because I've got some really nice separation. Again, I can't see, some really nice separation near the trees. So I've got the back of the mountain, the foreground of the mountain, I've got the mountain on the left hand side, the sun's hitting the top of the mountain on the right. Now what I'll do is I'll just change the composition a bit. So I've only got the trees, and then I'll put the trees in the middle, about there. Just double check they're sharp. Yep. And that should prove to be quite a nice shot. Okay, so I came to the top side of the rock. So I'm just going to try and look for what might make a nice image. I'm conscious I've got the sun right in my face, so I'm going to try and focus on the rock and see if we can play about with some kind of compositions here to get a nice image. So I'm lucky I've got the lens hood on, and that stops me getting any glare. So I'm going to just do a quick bracket shot so I've got all the exposures through the range, because obviously because the sun's shining towards me, the back of the rock is in shade. So if I can try and blend an overexposed shot with a darker exposure, then that will be a nice shot. So well, I think it's time for a wee coffee. I'd mentioned to you earlier about Fion's rock and what the other names of Fion's rock and what Fion's rock is famous for. So Fion's rock is also known as the praying hands of Mary, or just the praying hands. So I'm going to make myself a quick coffee and I'll have my wee breakfast bar. But the legend behind Fion's rock comes from Fionn McCool. So Fionn McCool was that legendary hunter from Ireland, also known as Fingal, and that's why we've got Fingal's cave over in Skye, because Fingal was a legendary hunter allegedly in the 3rd century over in Ireland, and he was a smallish giant. He wasn't like our Scottish giants who allegedly had that big fight, and that's why the giant causeway is the way it is, because legend has it that the Scottish giant, I can't remember his name, it's like Bernanay or something like that, stepped over what was the causeway at the time over to Ireland. Fingal had disguised himself as a baby. His wife was looking after him, and when the Scottish giant came in, he got such a fright that he saw the baby being such a size that he fled back to Scotland. But while he did that, he destroyed the causeway between Ireland and Scotland and scooped it out, hence why you've got the flute rocks on Ireland, Giant's Causeway, and you've got the flute rocks over in Scotland and at the Fingal's Cave. But this stone, the legend around the stone is, the reason this stone has been split is because Fingal hit and split the stone with his arrow. So I'll leave that with you. I'm going to have my coffee. I'm going to have my breakfast bar. I'm going to just reflect where I am, because it's absolutely beautiful and it's peaceful. And I'll pick up with you as we take more images, because what I'm going to do is take some close-ups of the rock, but also there are other rocks round about here that could be really nice foreground interest, especially for shots down the glen. Now is the focal point and the whole point of Fionn rock is because it was legendary split by Fingal's arrow. What you ideally want to do is get the composition or the view through the split in the rock. But actually the scenery of the glen behind the rock is absolutely stunning. So what I'll do is I'm going to play around with some image compositions at the moment. I've taken a shot here, so I'm looking down the glen. I've got the leading line of the rocks up to Fionn's rock. I'm going to stand over here and see if there's a nice composition that way, and I might put Fionn's rock in the centre of my image and get the rocks to lead me right up the centre of the image. I'll then move to the left hand side, although that might be a bit tricky because the sun is right here. So I've put my lens hood on my lens, which is making a difference. I'm not getting any lens flare, but I'm having to stop down just because of the brightness. I'll move around, I'll share my images as I go, and let's see how these shape out. I've had to place my tripod on this rock, because like I said earlier, I want to try and get those foreground rocks in the centre and use it as a leading line in to Fionn's rock. Now, all I would say is, if you're doing this, you need to be really careful, because sometimes the rocks aren't always that secure or where you position your tripod legs, and it's quite easy for your camera to tip over. So just be careful when you're doing this, because it's not a flat surface. But what I'm doing is I'll just climb on the rock. So I've set up my composition. Again, I'm still in portrait mode. I've actually got a stunning shot down the glen. I'm just going to zoom out a bit. I'm going to focus in on the rock. So that's Fionn's rock. I've just underexposed it slightly, only because I don't have a filter on, and I want to get the blueness in the sky. There's some really nice clouds coming over the tops of the mountains now. So that's a 50th of a second f11. I've dropped the ISO to 50. I'm actually going to lower the composition a bit so that I've got less sky in the foreground. Right, so I'm now in front of Fionn's stone, and my lens hood is actually protecting the lens for the lens flare. The wind's starting to pick up. I don't know if you can see, but there's a lot of clouds starting to form over the mountains now, and it's actually kind of getting blown this way. So luckily I've been here early, so I've got some nice shots with the sun, because I can see that in the next 2 hours that'll be gone. So what I'm doing is I'm just focusing on the rock. Hopefully that wind noise isn't too distracting. I've got 125th of a second, so I've had to speed up the shutter. ISO 100, I'm at f11. I've focused on the rock. Right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom close into the rock. So the other thing in this composition, what I've done is there's a little grass mound just in front of me here before the rock. So there's a shadow being cast to the left hand side. So I'm sweeping in through the mound to the rock, and the shadow's being cast to the left. So from a compositional point of view, we've kind of got a triangle. So actually, as long as it exposes properly, it'll be a nice image. I'm just walking you up so you can see the rock, and I'm going to lift the camera up so that you can see right through the gap that Fingal's arrow allegedly created. And that's the view right beside Fingal's rock. That is absolutely glorious. I'm not sure if you can see what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to take a shot of Fion's rock behind this big rock, but I'm focusing on the moss at the edge of the rock so that Fingal's rock is out of focus. Do you know, the higher up the mountain I get, these views just get more and more spectacular. It is amazing. I checked my watch, so I've walked and climbed 2.5 miles up. So I need to check on Google the name of this mountain. I hope that wind's not interfering too much. So I'm just going to take this shot. I'm going to focus in on the rock. Again, I'll bracket that one. And the wind's definitely picking up now. So what I will do is I'll pack up and start heading down towards the car, because that's coming up for 10 o'clock, so that means I've been here for 4.5 hours. So yep, let's see what we can find on the way down. I noticed a whole bunch of waterfalls, but I promise I won't stop. thank you for joining me this morning. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Remember, it's free. And if you press the bell notification, you'll get prompted each time I publish a new video. So thank you, and here's to the next video.